In the Republican corner, Donald Trump rallied for both Oz and election denier turned gubernatorial candidate Doug Mastriano. But ultimately, it all comes down to voter turnout in a state that could decide the Senate majority and give us a sense of the state of our democracy. Joining me now, Congresswoman Madeleine Dean, Vice Chair of the House Judiciary Committee and former House Impeachment Manager, clearly in a parking lot because she's canvassing, Pennsylvania State Representative Malcolm Kenyatta, and next to him, actor and activist Kerry Washington. Thank you all very much for coming to the Sunday show. Representative Kenyatta and Ms. Washington, it's great to see you. What are you hearing from voters? What are you hearing out there on the campaign trail?
So I will tell you, we are in the thick of it. It was a big deal to have two presidents, a future senator, and a future governor all right in my district, because this is where the election is going to be won. If black voters show up in the numbers that I believe they will show up at, if young people show up, I think we can win this race. And having Kerry here and having so many people here talking about what's at stake, how we actually lower costs for Americans, how we deal with the gun crime crisis that we're seeing, and how we continue to build on so much of the progress that we've seen in the Biden administration, lowering health care costs, things that Congresswoman Dean has voted for.
Kerry, let me get your thoughts in here before I go to the Congresswoman. What are you seeing out there on the ground? What are you hearing?
I'm hearing that people really want to matter in this community. That there's a lot of resources that are needed here, and we're really talking a lot about connecting what people have in their lives to their vote. People understanding that turnout in midterms is always rough, and that's because people aren't getting, inundated with splashy presidential campaigns. But midterm elections are where you pick the people who really make day-to-day decisions about your day-to-day life. So the midterms are tremendously important, and this is an extremely important midterm here in Pennsylvania. The whole country is watching and counting on voters here, and you hear that. You hear that they feel how much they matter in this moment.
Well, to that point, Congresswoman Dean, at their rally in Philadelphia last night, President Obama and President Biden emphasized that this election is a defining moment for our democracy. How is that message landing with voters?
Well, I had the pleasure of being with Malcolm last night as we heard from Josh Shapiro, his closing arguments. John Fetterman did phenomenally well, and then extraordinarily to have both presidents here. Pennsylvania is going to be the keystone state again in this national election cycle. And that's why what Kerry said is so absolutely central. People matter, and the midterms matter. What I saw was such an extraordinary contrast. The brightness, the light, the aspirational qualities of Democratic candidates versus the darkness and doomsday and fear-mongering of Republican candidates. So when I'm talking to voters here at the ShopRite in Cheltenham or at the churches I was just at, they are worried for our country, for our future, for their children, for the safety of their children, for the safety of this planet, for the safety of their vote, for the protection of our right to vote. But the choice could not be clearer. And that's what person after person after person has told me.
The state representative and Kenyatta, recent polling shows that Lieutenant Governor Fetterman still holds a sizable lead over Dr. Oz when it comes to black voter support. And you were talking about this earlier, but some black voters have criticized Fetterman for not spending enough time in Philadelphia. As someone representing a majority black Philadelphia district, what do you make of that criticism? And can Fetterman overcome that criticism, or has he already?
Listen, I ran against John in the primaries. We all remember it was a whole thing. But I've gone to 34 different counties since the primary telling people why I'm voting for John. Congresswoman Dean said it right. John is actually campaigning on a message to deal with the problems that people have in their real lives. Republicans have no plan. If you want to talk about inflation, John's the only one who's willing to stand up to big corporations and take on the price gouging. Republicans pretend to care about crime, but I will tell you, Dr. Oz does not give a damn about black folks in this community who've lost their lives. You can't pretend to be tough on crime and then be soft on the NRA, soft on guns being proliferated in our community. communities. And John's the only one who's willing to say we need to stand up for the union way of life, to raise wages so people have family-sustaining incomes. And so the choice here is crystal clear. Republicans have for decades pretended to care about freedom while they're trying to now rip away the freedom to choose, the freedom to love. And I'm telling you this, I believe that we're going to win this election, and then we're going to be able to get back to D.C. And continue delivering, because Democrats have delivered, and with a bigger, bolder majority in the Senate and retaining control in the House, we can do much more.
Let me add to that, John.
Go right ahead.
This is really important.
Mm-hmm.
I want to add, I think often sometimes people are looking for a perfect candidate. We have a tendency toward hero worship in this country, where we look for the flaws and we try to figure out how somebody might not be good enough. I'm here because I really believe in Fetterman, but I believe in Fetterman because he believes in the people. I'm not just here to support a candidate. I'm here to support this community and lifting up the candidate who believes in the value of this community and that this community matters. We have to start to believe that we matter in order to show up. We have to participate in this democratic process to improve our lives, because whether we like it or not, decisions are being made every day that impact us. And if we're not in the game is being played without us, and it's being stolen from us. So we have got to get in the game and value ourselves enough to show up for this process. I'm not perfect. You're not perfect. I think Fetterman is an incredible candidate, but it's not about picking on, does he do this and that? He is clearly the choice that is better for our community. We have to love our community.
Well, to that point, I'm glad you brought that up, because you're in Philadelphia. You're going to be going to Temple University and visiting churches to get out the vote, focusing on voters of color. But what do you say to those voters of color, particularly black voters, who are like, you know what, I don't even know if it's worth it?
Listen, I get it. I say that there has been a system in place that has been working to convince you that it's not worth it. There is a whole population of folks who don't want you to vote. People came out in record numbers in 2020, and what happened all over the country? Voting laws were enacted to make it more difficult to vote. They only come for you when they're afraid of you. They are afraid of the power of voters. They are afraid of the people. They are afraid of people knowing that they care and they matter and making choices on the ballot that make our lives better. So don't let them take that belief away from you. Really show up. The only way that we create change, that's not true. There's a lot of ways that we create change, but one of the most important, most fundamental ways that we create change in our community is showing up and voting. And if you buy the BS that your vote doesn't matter, you're letting somebody else control your life and make decisions for you and your family and your community. Democracy is on the line. A woman's right to choose is on the line. The economy is on the line. Gun control is on the line. We have to show up for ourselves and our families, our loved ones, and our communities. We have to.
And Congresswoman Dean, I'm going to end the conversation with you. There are heightened concerns about voter intimidation and threats this election cycle. Your advice to voters worried about their security when casting their ballot on Tuesday?
Go with a confidence. I know here in the 4th Congressional District, there is a confidence around our election sites. We have an emergency number if you have any problem of intimidation, but we are not seeing any of that at our Dropbox site so far. So everybody get out and vote. What I want to point out is what you just saw demonstrated by Malcolm and Kerry. The generosity of spirit. Malcolm ran against John Fetterman and has spent the last months running for him. This is what Democrats do. We are a hopeful people. We lift up people of value. We lift up people who care about others. So, Kerry, thank you for being here in our important Keystone State. Everybody else, pay no attention to these back and forth polls. What matters is that you all come out and vote up and down for Democrat, because they hold your values. That's it.
I'm going to close this.
Don't be afraid.
What was that, Kerry? Don't be afraid?
Don't be afraid. Do not be afraid.
She's going to help us win, Jonathan, I promise you.